Ready to rock and roll?
Oh, yeah. I should have just left one out of town.
Springfield Board and Mayor and Alderman meeting is called to order. Please stand and we'll have the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome, everyone. We're glad you're here tonight. Our first item on our agenda is 1.2, the approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of Board of Mayor and Aldermen held on March 15th, 2022. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, a second by Alderman Gregg. Are there any corrections to the minutes? No corrections. We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
1.3, our public hearing. Our first public hearing is ordinance 22-04, an ordinance amending Chapter 5 of the Springfield zoning ordinance pertaining to R10, RS10, and R7 side yard setback requirements. If anyone would like to speak for this public hearing, please come to the mic. You have 2 minutes to speak and state your name and your address. Anyone like to speak? The public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 2, Resolution 22-15. A resolution annexing property owned by Bon Omen located on Blackwood Road. If you would like to speak, please come to the mic. No one would like to speak? The public hearing is closed. Public hearing number 3. No parking on south side of 3rd Avenue West from North Oak Street to Connell Street. If you would like to speak, please come to the mic. No one would like to speak? The public hearing is closed. We would like to move in front of our legislative agenda. We would like to move 3.12 before the legislature. 3.12, do we need to vote on that to move it? Yes. Could we have a motion?
So
Is it
moved.
possible?
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion on this motion? No discussion?
Which item is it?
3.12. It's the presentation on the draft report of the systems development fee study. We would like to move that so that we can talk about that and those folks can be on the road. I'm thinking that was your thoughts.
Yes.
Okay. Are we ready to vote on moving this?
We're doing roll call vote.
Roll call. Yes, sure. Yes, ma'am.
Green,
Aye.
Arnold,
Aye.
Gregg,
Yes.
Schneider,
Aye.
Hubbard,
Aye.
Trotter,
Aye.
Harris.
Yes.
Pass 7-0.
Thank you. 3.12, discuss and possible take action on a presentation and a draft report of the systems development fees from the Triskel Vice Inc. It's your turn.
All right, thank you, Mayor. The day has finally arrived that we have a report that is in your packet, but also a copy of the presentation, which is quite a bit thinner than the report itself. And Carson Bice from Tischler Bice, who is our consultant on this project, is here to present the report. I've had conversations with a number of you about this. We've been anticipating this, and so Mr. Bice is here to present the findings of the report and then also to take our questions. At the conclusion of that, what we would be looking for from you as staff is a kind of a feel of what you would like to see next month in the way of an ordinance adopting these fees, if you intend to adopt these fees. Because what you'll see tonight is, I believe Mr. Bice is going to present what's maximum what the maximum allowable fees are, and then if we want to do that, that's one option, and if you wanted to do something else, then that would be something that we will bring that ordinance back for your consideration next month.
And if I'm correct, I think we talked about this in the previous year's
We did.
strategic planning, if I'm correct. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Aldermen.
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure, and thank you for moving this up. I'm from Chattanooga originally. I live in Washington DC now, but I have a fraternity brother whose birthday is tonight, so they're having a big do, and since I'm in town, I'd like to make that, so I appreciate that you guys moved this up.
Absolutely.
So, as you said, let me make sure I got this right here.
It doesn't work for us either, usually.
Well, if you remember, it was about 4 months ago, I stood in front of you, we had a work session to introduce the topic of system development charges. Thank you. And now we are right back
I don't think you're holding your mouth right with that device.
to where we are started from, so, let's see here. It's my PowerPoint valet.
He'll make it work, I promise.
So we had a work session a few months ago to introduce the concept of system development charges. And we are, in fact, at the point where we have, as Mr. Martin mentioned, the draft, as we like to call them, maximum supportable system development charges. And this is where, politics comes into play in terms of, to what extent do we want to adopt the maximum amount? Do we want to adopt only certain categories, et cetera? So we're here to talk to you about that tonight, answer any questions you have. And as Mr. Martin said, the presentation is much shorter than the report. But if we want to go into the minutia or get into the weeds, if you will, we can certainly do that.
I can advance it.
Oh, you can advance it? Oh, excellent.
Just tell
Okay,
me
then
when
let's
you
go to the
want
next slide. I'll just say next slide then. Okay, so the overview, I'm going to, sort of refresh your memory in terms of system development charge basics, go over the land use assumptions, which is basically the development projections we're using as part of the study. The charges that we have calculated maximum supportable charges for include general government, or otherwise known as municipal facilities, parks, police, fire, transportation, water, and wastewater. We will have a summary, or as I like to call it, the full freight, if you will, in terms of what a typical single-family unit would pay, and then a comparison of your draft charge amounts to peer communities in the region, so you can get a sense of where you would fall. First of all, system development charges / impact fees, they are not a revenue raising mechanism. They are in fact a land use regulation that just happens to generate revenue. We have to meet 3 prongs of a legal test. The first is need or nexus. So as part of the impact fees, the system development charge study, we have documented where the city is in terms of growth, how you've grown in the past, what you're likely to, or how you're likely to grow in the future, and that growth is going to generate the need for additional infrastructure. We have to show proportionality, and so that's why you'll see the fee categories by type of land use. So we just don't have a residential fee or a non-residential fee. It's bifurcated, if you will, into single-family versus multifamily, retail versus office versus industrial, because each of these land uses have different indicators of demand, and so we have to make sure the fees are proportional to that demand. The fee payer has to also receive a benefit, and we show benefit in 2 ways. One is through the timing of the expenditure, meaning that we just don't collect the system development charges and collect them for a 10 or a 15 or a 20-year period and don't spend them. We have to spend them within a reasonable time period so the fee payer receives benefit. But we also have to show benefit geographically. That's really not an issue in a community the size of Springfield. It's not like we're a large county or a very large city where fee payers perhaps in the south are paying for infrastructure in the north for which they don't receive a benefit. And in all cases, the charges that we have calculated truly are a citywide benefit, and we don't need to look at collection expenditure zones or benefit zones, et cetera. And I think we're right back to where we started. There we go. Okay, so if you remember from our last meeting, there are basically three different ways to think about how we calculate the system development charges. The first is you can look to the past, so that we call that a cost recovery or a buy-in method, and that's where you have oversized infrastructure either through forethought or by accident, doesn't matter. There's excess capacity in the system, and we're going to have new development buy into that excess capacity. The second way we calculate fees is what we call a consumption-based approach or an incremental expansion, and that's where we look to the present. It's by far the most popular method for calculating these types of charges, and that's what we've utilized in most of the system development charges that we've calculated for the city of Springfield. And that basically, it's sort of formulaic in that it looks at where you are as an infrastructure system in terms of, for instance, parks and recreation, how many acres you have per 1,000 people, or how many square feet of police facilities you have per person, et cetera. And then we look at, well, what does it cost us to replicate that infrastructure today in terms of if we were to go out into the market and have to buy an acre of land, what does it cost us? If we have to build a tennis court, what does it cost us, et cetera? And we're going to incrementally expand the system as development occurs. We also have the plan-based method, which looks to the future, typically is based on a master plan, and more importantly, that master plan has a funding source or a funding plan as part of it, because whenever we do a plan-based approach, we have to calculate a growth share, and so there's a lot of risk there. You may get a higher system development charge than under the consumption-based approach, but the downside is that if there is a recession or there is a blip in the market and you're counting on X amount of dollars from new development in terms of the system development charge in order to implement this plan, and you fall short, you still have to build the plan. It's now we have to come up with other growth-related revenues from the general fund or some other source in order to make that plan whole. With that consumption-based approach, we mitigate that exposure to the general fund because by definition, if we're looking at your existing levels of service, there is no growth share. So if growth is faster, we collect more money, we build more infrastructure. If growth is slower, we collect less money, but we don't have to build as much infrastructure. We just have to build to the amount that we collect. And so there's less exposure for the city. We also, if you remember from our presentation previously, we have to guard against new development paying twice, once through the system development charge and then again through a future stream of revenue. That future stream of revenue can include debt service, it could include dedicated funding sources such as property tax or sales tax, et cetera. And then when you implement the system development charges, there's always that opportunity or situation that may occur where a developer comes to the door and offers as part of their proposal, we're going to dedicate or give the city X amount of acres for parks, or we're going to make this road extension that's part of the system development charge. And so we have to make sure that the developer gets made whole. We do that through a development agreement, and they either get paid back through a future stream of revenue, or the fees are reduced until they're made whole. So this slide summarizes the development projections. I can't even read that from here with my glasses. It looks like we are projecting. Can you help me out there, Candace? How many people? Oh, here we go. Sorry. Oh, it's behind me. Okay, here we go. 5,000 or almost 5,200 additional persons within the city. That equates to about 2,250 new housing units. In terms of employment, we're projecting 3,400 new employees, and that equates to about 1.8 million square feet of non-residential activity. We think that is a conservative projection. There are a substantial number of units within the pipeline, but as we all know, there has to be a market for these units, and I think we're sort of in the 8th inning in terms of where we are in this market, and so I would expect a downturn to happen sometime in the next few years. And so it's important to note that also these development projections aren't driving the fee amounts because of the approach we took, that consumption-based approach. And so, the fee calculations are immune to this growth rate. So that, you can rest assured that we're not overstating the fees, so to speak. So let's turn to general government. The components here are general government space. We're taking that incremental expansion or consumption-based approach. The 10-year demand, and what we do here is we take those levels of service standards for the fee category, apply that to that growth projection in order to get an estimate of how much additional growth-related space would be demanded, and then put a cost to that. So if these growth projections were to hold true, we are projecting that the gross share of any new space would be about 8,000 square feet at a cost of about $4.1 million. Now, this is true for all the fee categories except water and sewer, and that is you can choose to build a 15,000 square foot general government facility. However, we're projecting that the gross share is only 8,000 square feet of that, and so so there's that proportionate cost there. You can choose to build more, but there's a growth share, and so this is what the growth would be, demand would be. And as you can see here, the 10-year revenue approximates that demand, so it's $4.1 million in cost versus $4.1 million in revenue. And so when we look to the maximum supportable system development charges, the single-family unit is about $1,198. Multifamily is $901. And when we look at the non-residential square footage, the office and other services is $1,568 per 1,000 square feet, followed by institutional, commercial, and then industrial. Now, when we turn to parks, the component here is park improvements. We're assuming that over the next 10 years, the city doesn't go out and purchase additional park land. The focus is going to be on improving land that we have. When we apply the level of service standards based on your current inventory to this development projection, we are projecting an additional 30 improvements at a cost of about $1.6 million. The revenue also approximates $1.6 million, and the draft fee would be $792 per single-family unit and $596 per multifamily unit. Again, you could choose to build 40 units. The growth would only pay for 30. In terms of police, this is assessed against non-residential as well as residential development. It includes facilities and vehicles, which was calculated under a consumption-based approach. It also includes animal control and facilities and vehicles. Again, a consumption-based approach. The demand base there is population only. It does not include non-residential activity. The 10-year demand is about almost 2,100 square feet of additional space at a cost of about $1.1 million. We're projecting a need for an additional 13 vehicles at a cost of about $636,000, about 1,100 square feet of additional animal control facilities at $58,000, and then one additional animal control vehicle at $34,000. The 10-year revenue projections about $2.5 million. And the draft's maximum supportable system development charges are $529 for a single-family unit, $398 for a multifamily unit. And then when we go to the non-residential, unlike the general government where office and institutional uses had a higher fee, commercial and retail has the highest fee because they have the highest demand for public safety services. And so retail would have a fee of $1,018 per 1,000, followed by office at $452, institutional at $296, and industrial at $140 per 1,000 square feet. Fire, the same situation, non-residential and residential development would both be assessed this system development charge. The 10-year demand for facilities and land is 6 acres and about 4,800 additional square feet at $2.6 million. Additional almost 4 pieces of apparatus at a cost of about $1.2 million. And the 10-year revenue is projected about $3.85 million. And your draft system development charges are $1,110 for a single-family unit, $835 for multifamily. Again, commercial would have the highest fee for fire at $22.93 per 1,000 square feet, followed by office and other services, institutional uses, and then industrial uses at the lowest. Now, turning our attention to transportation, the component here is arterial street improvements. We've taken a consumption-based approach. We are projecting, based on the current levels of service on your arterial road network, that over the next 10 years, our travel demand model indicates that you'd have to build almost 6 lane miles in order to maintain current levels of service. That cost is estimated at almost $15 million. That 10-year revenue would also approximate about $15 million. And the draft system development charge is $5,250 for a single-family unit, $2,199 for multifamily unit. Much like public safety, retail and commercial development have the highest impact on traffic due to their trip generation rates. And so that fee is $7,058 per 1,000 square feet, followed by office, institutional, and industrial land uses. Could you advance it, please? Okay, for water, we have basically what we call an investment buy-in approach for your water system. It includes the city's investment in not only treatment, but also transmission, as well as storage. So we've looked at what your asset value is and looked at basically the equivalent dwelling units that you can serve. So basically, new development's buying a share of this investment that the city has made. And the fees for water and sewer are very different in terms of their the way they're collected for residential and non-residential development. It's basically based on meter size. And so the 0.75 or 3/4 inch meter is basically the single family equivalent. And then there's a capacity ratios published by the American Waterworks Association that pegs the different meter sizes to their single family equivalent, which is what you see as that capacity ratio. And so a single family house would pay $1,270 for a water system development charge. And depending on the type of use and what sort of meter size they needed, that fee could range from the $1,270 all the way up to $224,000 per meter. So those are obviously your large industrial water users. And then wastewater, very different approach. The city is going to actively, or plans to actively expand the wastewater system. So there is a wastewater treatment component as well as planned interceptors. Again, these system development charges are based on a meter size as well. And so the single family meter, or single family unit would pay a fee of $4,778. And that could range to a high of a 12-inch meter of about $844,000 for wastewater. 2 more slides here, actually 3 more slides. This is your non-utility system development charges, and I'm going to focus on the residential because that's what most people think about when think about impact fees and system development charges. So the full freight on the non-utility is $9,110 for a single-family unit compared to $5,102 for a multifamily unit. And then, again, what we just saw from the utility system is based on meter sizes. A single-family house would pay about $6,048 for utilities. And then when we compare the city, and this is only non-utility because whenever you get into these fee comparisons, you have a variety of different utility providers and sometimes multiple within one community. So it's much easier just to compare the non-utility. So you can see within, if the city were to adopt 100% of the maximum supportable, you would be among the highest in the region. Franklin has a significant charge. They're at $92.15. We just finished Murfreesboro, which also includes, they've taken on city schools, and they haven't adopted these yet, but they would be higher than you if they did go forward with that. Then Nolensville also has a significant fee at $59.28, so does Brentwood, and then it gets down all the way to the lowest in the city of Portland at $1,243 per single-family house. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the report or anything else about system development charges.
This is a lot to digest, group. And, since this is the first time you've seen this, and, I know you're going to have lots of questions. Do you have any tonight?
So what's the maximum fee if we adopted the highest fee? What was that?
It would be $9,100 plus 6048.
So roughly 15,
About,
16,000.
yes, about $16,500, yeah.
But that would make us the highest of what you.
Well, you also, I mean, you're gonna have a utility fee if you're in Franklin also, so it's probably somewhat comparable.
But even the smallest city you have at Portland is 1243, and presently we have nothing.
We have nothing.
Right.
Right. We're below. No, we're not even on the chart.
We're not on
Yeah,
the
you're
chart.
not on the chart.
We don't arrive on the chart.
I'm curious to know whether you have any knowledge or inclination of whether these other cities will be increasing their fees. I know growth in Nashville right now is at an all-time high. And
It
so I'm
is.
curious if these fees are outdated in your opinion.
Well, see, that's why I don't like these kind of charts, is
Yeah.
because they're not an apples to apples comparison. So
Certainly.
several things at play. To your point, when was the last time they adopted the fees? Number two, did they adopt 100% of the fees? So for instance, for Portland, we did the streets fee, it's just that they didn't adopt it, right? So we didn't do Franklin's, but, who knows if they adopted 100% of the streets, if they adopted 100% of the parks, et cetera. What components did they have? So for instance, parks is one where, we see parks fees that have parks, community center, aquatic center, open space, trails. Then we see parks fees that just basically have the way we did it, where you're gonna develop land that you already have. Sometimes there's a land component. So it's never really apples to apples, right? And I know this question's probably gonna come up, so I'll do a preemptive strike, and that is, in our work around the country, and I've been doing this 32 years, impact fees do not drive away development. There's a reason development wants to come to your community, and the fact that you have development fees does not mean that it's going to dry up or go to another county.
But any development fee that we charge per se, fire, police, whatever, it stays within that department. Is that correct?
Exactly.
And it can only be
It has
used
to.
to advance something in that department.
Exactly.
And, Mayor,
Yes, sir.
only to be used under the approach that's adopted. So certain things you can't go backwards on, and you have to look forward on. And you may need to get into that a little bit more detail.
Sure.
I think that probably provides the greatest source of confusion. But just to just sort of capitalize on what you just mentioned, we had the stakeholder meeting here in this room with the builders, and one of the builders that builds the most around here said that when Carson asked the question, he raised his hand, he said, I don't care, I'm just gonna put it on the price of the house. So it's not gonna affect the build. Most folks, when they meet with Mr. Brewer and his staff, they're shocked. They say, okay, they have their pen out, they're like, okay, so tell me how much the impact fees are so I know, so I can calculate that in here, and we say, well, we don't have any. So they're kind of stunned at that. And so the question I would have, Carson, would be, what, you mentioned that, say, Portland, I think they didn't adopt something, and some other folks. Do we have to adopt either 100% of everything, 95% of everything, or can you do 50% of this one and 0 of this one and 85% of that one? How does that?
Yeah, you can do that. What we can't do is we can't discriminate against land use. So for instance, we can't say, we're gonna adopt 100% of the police for residential, but we're only gonna adopt 50% of it for non-residential, right? You can adopt 50% of a fee category across the board, but keep in mind that you're gonna have to come up with that other 50% of revenue somewhere else, right? If you wanna maintain current levels of service, because the next time you do the fee study, your level of service is gonna have deteriorated.
Well, and to my knowledge, since I've been on the board, we've never had one of these studies. I'm turning to Mr. Hubbard, because he's been here longer than I have.
No, we haven't, this first. Of this,
So on this, what you're showing under Springfield proposed, is that what you are proposing to us, or are you just proposing that's the maximum we
That
can
is,
do?
that is primarily a math exercise, that based on the levels of service that we have defined, And the cost factors that we've defined, and that's something that can be debated. I mean, I would argue that some of the cost factors are very conservative, right? So someone could say, well, it should be more than that per square foot. But it's an exercise in math, and so this is the maximum supportable based on the study that we did. So you couldn't just decide, and I've had to answer this question before, you know, if we say that the fee's $760 for police, you can't just decide to adopt 900 because you think that's the right fee, right? It's not supported by the study.
But if you're saying 760, you have evidence to support that?
Yes, yes, sir.
Is there any reason that in the different line items that you have, fire, police, parks, would there be any reason not to adopt a fee for that particular division?
I mean, that's a qualitative question. I will tell you that I don't see any reason why you wouldn't. You know, we've done this where it's obvious, well, you know, the juice isn't worth the squeeze for police because you're only gonna get, you know, $151 a house or whatever, because, you know, there is no plan to buy, you know, to build additional infrastructure. The only component in there is police and equipment, so it really probably doesn't make sense to do. A lot of times there are those one or two that you're just like, yeah, probably not. But in your case, there's a compelling argument for all of the categories.
But then your company, as you've been contracted with the city to do, is to report back to us this maximum fee of what you think we could charge based on what
Yes, sir.
our city is.
Yes, sir.
Does your company come back and suggest a price that you think it should be, not a maximum price?
That is not that is your job.
But what do
frankly.
you see
Right.
most cities do when you do a study like this? Is it just all over the board?
It's all over the board. It is all over the board. In fact, just yesterday, dealing with the city in Ohio where they've got a bunch of development agreements. Developers have lined up financing based on certain criteria. And so if you were to now adopt this fee structure, it sort of blows up the pro formas. And that's a frequent concern and legitimate concern by communities, is that, you know, you do have things in the pipeline that have their pro formas and financing are based on certain assumptions. And so there's a phase-in period for fees. But in this case, they only have a limited amount of growth, and so it almost doesn't make sense for them to collect the fees because the development agreements are exempting so much. So anyway.
Of course, some of these fees are lower in, I would guess in places like Brentwood or whatever, because they've got so much growth
Could be.
and more.
Or they have
and more area
sales
to
tax.
grow in.
Or, yeah, they've got dedicated sales tax. I mean, I was in Williamson County today, and we were talking about, you know, the need for the offsets or credits for the schools, because we're updating their school fees again, and, you know, they've got all these different revenue sources there that not only the county, but cities are benefiting from, which negates the need for some of the fees. And they've got the privilege tax there.
Let's just go on down the road. Mr. Trotter? Mr. Hubbard?
Yes, I just want to sort of reiterate a comment that you said, very profound. Old wives' tales from older developments about the capacity fee, you know. We gonna go somewhere else, you're just gonna drive us away. I'm glad you said that, because I don't feel it would. And I'm glad to hear the city manager, when he made his statement about developer, just added on into the cost of the house. So, you know, I go along with on my challenges, I'm saying I go along with what you said, okay? Because at one time, you know, old school developers, you know, sort of wanna threaten and kick us around. But the new school that's coming on, you know, they're playing it like they should play it.
Thank you. We already know from sitting here month after month how much growth is coming to the city of Springfield. And this is part of our growing pains. And we already know each department, being police, the fire needs more. If we're gonna have 528 units here and 230 some here, and we hear from the people that have had their residence for 30-plus years, like myself, all these people are coming. I don't want it all passed on to onto that homeowner that's been here 30 years. We've got to do something else. So we're at the crossroads. Mr. Gregg?
My comment would be that it is a necessary evil that has to be done, and there's really nowhere else that these developers can go.
That's true.
True.
Yeah.
Ms. Arnold?
He said what I was going to say. I don't really know where else they would go. I think that we probably have the most opportunity for them in the Middle Tennessee area, so.
We waited for this.
Yeah, here we are.
I don't really have a question just so much as I think that we need to adopt these fees. I think that, you know, we have a lot to offer here in Springfield, and we don't want to pass. I've learned a lot about budgeting in my brief time on the board here, and, you know, we have to be able to pay for all these things. We've talked a lot about needing new buildings and needing new things, and we have to be able to pay for those things, and I think this is a very proactive way to plan for our future.
But and to make sure that I understand it, because I was not here when you had your first meeting, I was absent. But in these fees that we charge, we are allowed to use, in that department, we are allowed to use some of that money to fix present problems. We are not. It all has to be for future.
Right, that's what we refer to as correcting an existing deficiency, and we can't use the fees for that. We have to provide net new capacity.
Okay. But to some degree, and Mr. Martin, you may shed some light on this, to some degree, we are landlocked in the city of Springfield. Because we cannot incorporate anybody else into the city unless we are asked to. Is that correct?
That's the most common way now under the new annexation law. There's a mechanism where you can do it by referendum.
Okay.
I'm not sure to what extent that's been tried and tested in the state of Tennessee since the law changed, but you can do that. It's just, we haven't had to go down that road because we're getting annexation requests every month.
And that's the thing that we're gonna have to look at to charge these fees, because we are not necessarily going out and trying to get these people to come into the city of Springfield. They're asking us to let them come into the city of Springfield.
correct.
Because they want the city services. And there's no reason not to let whoever's building or whoever's moving into it pay for this. Because as the mayor said, it's not fair to our present residents that have been here forever, that's depending, I mean, of course, sales tax is great, but still property tax and that type stuff, they can't foot the bill on other people's desire to move here.
Yes, sir.
I think that's the important point for the board. I believe what Mr. Bice in the study has identified is a projected amount of growth in our departments, knowing what services are gonna need to be provided via parks. We're not married to, so parks, for instance, there's not, it doesn't contemplate purchasing new land. Doesn't say we can't, but it just, for purposes of the study, contemplates making improvements where we are and adding where we are. So we're not locked into, but that's what the formula and the projections are based on. What that means is that that's the amount of growth we can expect. We talked at strategic planning about what we're going to need in the next 5 years, what we're going to do in the next 5 years in order to make sure we can provide the level of service that we're going to have to provide. So ultimately, it boils down to, we're going to spend that money. And so we're either going to spend it on the back, like Mr. Harris said, of property tax and sales tax, or we're going to supplement that with some of these system development fees and help that. We're building Batson Parkway Extension whether we have impact fees or not. The difference being, if we have impact fees, we are going to be able to use some of that money and it not come off the property and sales tax as much. Mr. Bice, I have another question. So one of the biggest things we have going on right now is the wastewater treatment plant. That price tag is up to about $47 million. How contemplating how we would bring in those fees, I believe the wastewater fee was
6,000, I think.
6,000.
4,000.
Yeah, just shy. For most resident, for a single family, would be just shy of 5,000. So, it's gonna take a while. We're not gonna get to 47 million on that.
Excellent point.
So how does that work? If you can walk us through that
Yeah.
exercise of how that might work as we're
Yeah.
building that plant. It's a 4-year project.
Right.
We collect some fees and then we have a bunch of debt service and how that works.
Right, so that's the one that was calculated using the plan-based approach, where everything else, other than water, which was a buy-in, was done using the consumption-based approach. So what happens, and the reason why the fees aren't you know, something that just sits here for 10 years and you need to update them basically on your 5-year CIP horizon, so they're following the flow of where the city's going in terms of their capital plan, but also reflects demographic changes that are occurring, as well as reflect the most, you know, recent development projections, is that in this case, let's say you build the wastewater treatment plant in year 4 or year 5. Right now, it's a plan-based approach. Once that occurs, you then switch into that buy-in approach, where you say, look, we just spent 47 million. Of that 47 million, let's say 5 million was paid for through the impact fees or system development charges we collected from years 1 through 4, right? Now we switch to this cost recovery, and we're gonna now recoup the 42 million remainder over the next 10, 15, 20 years, however long it takes. And the easy thing, what makes utilities easy from that perspective is it's a closed infrastructure system. Your road network isn't. I can come from Nashville and drive on your road system. I can't come from Nashville and use your wastewater treatment plant. So it is we know what the cost per gallon is. And so whenever you get that many equivalent dwelling units that are into the system, that's when you get your money that then pays off the debt on the wastewater treatment plant.
Could we pay, I mean, so we would have to be using other revenues in order to supplement that if the system development charges were.
Right, and
we
that's
could do
a
that.
common, I guess, a logistical issue that with cities that haven't collected impact fees or system development charges run into, is that there's this mindset of, oh, we can't build the fire station because we don't have enough impact fees yet. Well, it was never intended to work that way, right? If a fire station costs $4 million, you may pay $1.2 million in impact fees, then you're gonna come up with the other money.
Right.
And like I said, you may build 2 fire stations, let's say it's 20,000 square feet, but the gross share is only 8,000 square feet, right? So you're only gonna recoup so much.
Right. Well, and I think the population and the unit numbers are probably low. If you go back to page 3 and you look for development projections.
Right.
I think you've been very conservative.
Yes, we have.
So, in my opinion, working in the financial industry, we need a lot more. We already have discussed how many units we know that are coming. How many are there? I cringe every time I hear this, but
So that's a good point, Mayor. We've approved, or those that are in the approval process, are 3,300 new residential units. Mr. Bice, as he said, very conservatively projected about 2,200 over the next 10 years. So there's a possibility we could hit 3,000 in the next 5 years, depending on, you know, as we say, when the party ends. So, yeah, it's a very conservative projection, but that's a responsible projection,
Yes.
depending
And
on
again,
how.
it doesn't affect the
Yes.
fee results either.
Right.
Mr. Harris?
I think as Mr. Martin's already said, that, I mean, they have presented this program well to us and what they think needs to be done, so
Yes, sir.
not that you're done, but in retrospect, what we've asked you to do, you've done. So now
Yeah.
it's gonna be up to this board and staff to decide what to do. This is something that should have already been done several years ago with, I mean, it's just funding that we've not been able to take in. Do I wanna be on record as being the highest in the state? No, but we already get that reputation for our sewer system. That's it. And from that standpoint, but we can't leave money laying on the table anymore. We have got to take care of the city of Springfield. And as Ms. Green said a moment ago, when she asked the question about where these other folks' rates are, I can guarantee you they're going to adjust them if they need to. So at some point, we're probably not gonna be the highest on the system anymore.
I would agree.
So it would be my suggestion then, if we're not voting on this tonight, that staff bring back to us next month if they're in agreement with this proposal that they've made, or come up with a fee that you think it needs to be.
And
Would be my suggestion.
I'm hearing this from everyone. Am I correct? What Mr. Harris just said?
I agree.
Yes.
Staff,
I mean,
you've got your,
It's on the new people building.
That's correct.
any more questions?
Put your guys.
Any more questions so that he can, possibly get
And I'll
on the
be back
road
in
and out of
May
here.
for whatever
Yeah.
vote you guys have as
Yeah.
well, so.
If there's no more questions for him, let's dismiss him for, thank you so much. And you
My
get on the-
pleasure.
You get on the road
My
and,
pleasure. Thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you in May. Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any more discussion on this about the direction? I think we've, know which direction we want the staff to go in, and we're ready to move forward for next month. Okay?
So, Mayor, we'll bring back an ordinance that adopts the total fee, the maximum allowables for each category. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay?
If
Yeah.
that's what staff feels. I mean, I think you do, but
Yeah.
I
It's
don't know why
gotta,
you wouldn't.
it's gotta come from somewhere. I just want everyone to know kind of what that, I don't want anybody to have sticker shock, because when you combine those fees, it's about $15,000 per single-family residence and about $11,000 for each multifamily unit. So if you're building an apartment complex that's for 74 units or 75 units, which we'll discuss here in a little bit, that's $10,000 per unit. And so I just want everybody to understand, what the implications of that is. I think we're perfectly fine with that, because as we establish, the growth has got to be paid for somehow, and it's not really fair to our current residents to do that.
If you're
I think
building a
that's-
100-unit apartment complex, that is per unit,
That's per unit,
and that's considered multifamily.
the multifamily. Same way if you were building a 100-home subdivision, you do it that times 100, that for $15,000.
And if any complaints, we'll just make Mr. Trotter our point of contact.
He makes a good sergeant at arms. Well, and this is gonna be a touchy subject, and we're gonna get lots of phone calls from the builders, and, we're gonna have to be able to answer the questions. And, whatever we bring, the staff brings back for us next month, we always have the opportunity to adjust.
And this company that's done this, they've been in business a long time.
Yes.
Been in business a long time. They were, you can
Over 30
even
years.
tell just from, they're in Washington DC, and you can tell how many cities and counties in Middle Tennessee even use that company. They're nationally known, they're nationally used by a lot of cities and several. They did Portland's. He was in Williamson County today doing an update on theirs. They've done a lot of cities in Tennessee and nationwide, so.
So they have a history of knowing that it's not gonna adversely affect your growth.
Sure.
I would be safe to say we can depend on his word of what he said of that.
This $15,000 is a small amount as to what these builders are making on these houses.
Well,
And then we have to look at our neighbors. We're about the last frontier to really get this. Cheatham County, Williamson County was first to get it, then Wilson, Sumner, Montgomery, and that's coming to us. So, this is just,
this is growing
it's
pains.
that evil that you were talking about, brother.
Yeah.
But we have to go ahead and accept it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Ryan, you did say that you spoke with builders here that said.
We had a meeting
No
right here in
problem.
this room.
No problem, right?
We did.
So they didn't seem concerned.
Well, we'll have builders that will be concerned.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
That
I'm
didn't
sure.
attend the meeting that were invited.
Right.
I think the argument has always been, and even reading another city's ordinance today, the argument, they adopted 38% of their maximum allowables. And the rationale listed in their ordinance was that they didn't want to stifle development. Now, that was some years ago, okay? I think that there was an argument before when the city looked into this, because remember, at last strategic planning, we walked through the history. I believe Ms. Tillman walked us through the history of how the city changed the charter, went to the legislature and changed the charter in order to be able to do this, and that was in 2000 or 2001. And so it didn't happen because of the concern about stifling development, because at that time, you had local builders only that were building houses here or there in the city of Springfield. Now we're having national companies come in. We're having, the big home builders coming in, as well as regional folks coming in. Some are in this room tonight probably, and they are shocked at the notion that we don't have system development fees. Because everywhere they go, there are system development charges. And so when we had the stakeholder meeting here, there was a builder, like I said, that has built quite a bit in Springfield and continues to. You all have approved, and the Planning Commission is approving some of his stuff now. And Carson, or Mr. Bice asked for comments from the stakeholders, and he was the first one to raise his hand. He says, sounds good to me, just let me know what the number is so I can add it to the price of the home. That's their plan. The builders aren't going to lose money, and I don't want to stifle or take a risk on stifling development either, but you can guarantee that the builder's not going to go negative on the house now because of our impact fee.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And you can look to see what the prices of the houses are selling for in our area, and it's overwhelming when you look at what the prices were 2 years compared to today. Of course, the costs have gone up to build, absolutely, but we are a popular place to be. Okay, no other discussion, we'll move on.
But this is it's a per unit, it's not, is it base square footage wise, or is it?
No, sir.
So there's no chance of any of that being commingled around
No, sir.
of
It's
that?
it's per
It's
unit.
per unit.
Gotta be real careful of how you do that.
And
So, I
meter.
mean, if it's a 4,000 single-family dwelling or a 1,800 square foot single-family dwelling, it's the same fee.
Because if you look in the presentation, and the reason that's the same, and it's not taxed or charged, I shouldn't use the word tax because it's not taxed, but I meant that in an abstract sense. It's not treated separately because if you look at the amount of folks, and I'll have to find it here, under general government, on page 4, if you look at that top under general government, it'll say residential development, single family, and it's persons per housing unit. So it's based on, whether you have an 1,800 square foot home or a 4,000 square foot home, it's, the average person per home doesn't change. It's all an average. So it's based on the average amount of folks in a house.
And that's what it should be.
Yeah, so it's not, there's not a burden on a smaller home or a burden on a larger home. It's just whatever the average amount of folks is in a home is what it amounts to.
Okay, we're ready for our legislative agenda. 2.1, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 22-01 on a third and final reading. Or ordinance rescinding ordinance 21-05 in its entirety, establishing a new schedule of fees and charges for play at Legacy Golf Course. Motion made by Alderman Gregg and a second by Alderman Hubbard to discuss. Question on this third and final reading for the golf course. No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the vote.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 2.2, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 22-02 on a third and final reading. Or ordinance amending the fiscal year 2022's annual budget by amending certain general fund and utility fund operating budget. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Alderman Green to discuss. We need an amendment? Any questions on this third and final reading? No questions?
Lisa.
I think we're gonna pause.
Lisa?
It's the pause
Do we
button.
need an amendment on this? Do we need an amendment on 22-02? Okay. Just saw that.
Okay,
You have an amended Exhibit A in your packet, and Ms. Crockett can explain.
Miss Lisa Crockett.
The changes, is it on?
Yeah, you're good.
The changes that we've made this month were to add amendments for the Legacy Golf Course. They have exceeded their revenues that were budgeted, and so we have adjusted the budgets for that, but then we have also increased the expenses for cost of goods sold and the credit card fees, and we've added some capital projects that they can get done this fiscal year using those excess revenues to go ahead and do some improvements at the golf course. So those were the changes that I made this month.
Okay,
And Mayor,
Yes, sir.
kind of the rationale behind that is there are a lot of things that need to be done at the golf course.
yes, there is.
And a lot of these are things that were requested in the fiscal year '23 budget, and because revenues have been great this year at the golf course, I mean, the golf course is really doing well, and we're excited about that. We can take the opportunity to amend the budget, purchase some of those things in this fiscal year with the the revenues that have exceeded budget or will exceed budget, and that takes the pressure off of next year's budget. So we can take care of those issues, and that alleviates a little bit of the pressure for next year.
So the money's there.
Correct.
Yes. Yes, the money is there.
Just make
The
sure
golf
we're
course
not
is,
adding additional monies. The money's there, we're just changing,
Correct. It's-
making it legal to do what we need to do.
It's a balanced amendment where we're raising the revenue projections because they've come in well, and then raising expenditures by adding in those capital things.
I just want everybody to understand we want adding monies.
Right.
good point. Golf course looks great, and there's a lot of play going on. Every time I'm home and look out the window, the parking lot is full, and I can see lots of play going on the 13th green. And thank you for making the golf course look so good. Did somebody want to amend?
They already did.
Oh, okay. Okay. They have both agreed to amend.
Alderman Hubbard made the motion.
Uh-huh.
Greg seconded.
Okay. We've got an amendment on the floor. Any questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. We're back to the main motion as amended. Any questions? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 2.3, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 22-03 on a third and final reading. Ordinance rezoning a portion of 2 parcels located on Fifth Avenue East from commercial general district to high-density residential district. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Alderman Gregg to discuss. Any questions on this third and final reading of this rezoning? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 2.4, discuss and possible take action on ordinance 22-04 on a second reading. Or ordinance amending Chapter 5 of the Springfield zoning ordinance pertaining to R10, RS10, and R7 side yard setback requirements. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, a second by Alderman Gregg. Alderman Green. I can read today.
With the wonderful sign on Fifth Avenue.
Any questions on this second reading on the setbacks? Sorry, Alderman Green. No questions, discussion? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 2.5, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 22-08 on a third and final reading. A resolution annexing property owned by John T. Johnston and Bonnie Johnston located on Fifth Avenue East and Stevens Lane. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Alderman Green to discuss. Any questions for the staff? No questions, we're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 2.6, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 22-15 on a second reading. A resolution annexing property owned by Bon Orman located on the Blackwood Road. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, a second by Alderman Hubbard to discuss. Questions on this second reading? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 2.7, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 22-16, a resolution accepting the performance bond of ZPC contractors to guarantee the completion of water and wastewater improvements in the flats at Moreland subdivision. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Vice Mayor Harris. Questions on this resolution? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 2.8, discuss and possible take action on Resolution 22-17, a resolution to ratify the private chapter number 43 of the 112th General Assembly Amendment to the Municipal Charter of the City of Springfield. Motion made by Alderman Gregg, a second by Alderman Green to discuss. Mr. Martin,
Thank
our
you,
city
Mayor.
manager.
This day has finally gotten here. This is the day I think we've waited on since last year when you all passed the resolution requesting the General Assembly to amend the charter, and they have done so. It's gone through both chambers of the Tennessee Legislature and signed by the governor. Again, what this does is brings our number of ordinance readings down from 3 to 2, which gets it more in line with general law for cities, as well as brings the competitive bid threshold to 25,000 versus 10,000. So what this means for us here is we will only have 2 readings for ordinances, which also means in the near term, no special called June meeting for a third budget reading. So that's our immediate impact, as well as you'll see a lighter consent agenda because we have to bring currently anything that's bid over $10,000 to you and for, consent on that part of the agenda, and we won't have to do that. So you'll have a lighter load. So Ms. Green, we will help out with some of that.
Okay, I'm gonna call on Vice Mayor Harris. She has a
So-
question?
Once this is done, when we get to, so the second reading will be the final reading.
That's correct.
So will we have public hearing and second reading the same night?
Yes, sir. You
That's
will
how
have
that-
public hearing, second reading, as well as be able to amend. That was one of the issues with third reading, is it was kind of ceremonial. There was no public comment available at the third reading, and you couldn't, with the exception of a budget amendment or the budget ordinance, you couldn't amend. So the third reading was really
Ceremonial.
a whole month later for not much that was going to change. Obviously, if you've passed it twice, you're probably going to stick with it after the public hearing and so forth. So you'll have public hearing on second reading, the vote, as well as you are able to amend on second reading.
So I guess my question would be if somebody brought something forth in public hearing that we weren't quite comfortable with,
We can pause.
we can table it to the next meeting or
That's correct.
for the second and final reading?
You could.
Not that that happens that often, I just wanted to, because we've had that third meeting to be able to think about it. But, okay. Just make sure I understand it.
Good question.
It's just,
Yes, sir.
it expedites things, understand, instead of that slow drag. So I'm glad to see it.
And this will go into effect when, if we pass it?
As soon as you vote.
Tonight,
It's effective upon ratification.
tonight,
Okay. Other questions?
let it rip.
Okay, no other questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you.
Historical move.
We will move on to our administrative session. 3.1, discuss and possible take action on the adjustments of the retail electric rates for the Springfield Electric Department due to a wholesale fuel cost adjustments by the Tennessee Valley Authority. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Vice Mayor Harris to discuss. Mr. Steve Sachs.
This is the time of year where the rates come back down, and I'm pleased to say that we're lowering our rates by 1%, not a significant number, but it's going in the right direction.
This is true. Any discussion?
I think I need to ask him a question.
Yes, sir.
The little situation that happened Sunday afternoon, is fixed?
The outage,
The outage, definitely.
we wish we had a smoking gun, we wish we could go out and say this is what happened. We haven't found that, we run all the circuits. We know where the problem was, we couldn't tell if a limb had fallen and knocked the line out. We didn't find an animal that might have gotten in the line, but we haven't had a problem since, so we're taking the high road that we've got whatever done over with, and, we're gonna do some more tree trimming, see if that doesn't, settle that
Have a
down.
problem yesterday, also?
I would definitely,
lights were out yesterday.
I would definitely
Maintenance
suggest
being
that
done yesterday.
a lot of people call.
Maintenance.
Okay.
It was in the, South Springfield substation.
Yes,
so,
definitely.
That side of town, and, like I said at the beginning, I wish we had a smoking gun that we could say, that was it, but we didn't find that.
Isn't that our newest substation?
Yes.
That's completed about 2010. All right, well, stay on top of it, sir.
All right.
Thank you for asking.
Any other discussions about the rate adjustment? No other discussion, we're ready for a vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.2, discuss and possible take action on the adjustment of the monthly gas rates of the Springfield Gas Department. Motion made by Alderman Gregg, a second by Vice Mayor Harris to discuss. Mr. Mike Stafford's here tonight to report.
Yes, the purchase gas adjustment for us is down 18.53%.
Good news. You can come back next month. Any questions for Mr. Stafford? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.3, discuss and possible take action to approve the offers on the surplus property acquired via the delinquent tax sale. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris and a second by Alderman Hubbard to discuss. Questions to the staff on this? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
3.4, discuss and possible take action to ratify the emergency tractor purchase from the Legacy Golf Course. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard and a second by Alderman Gregg to discuss.
Give him what he needs. He's in the corner right there.
Any questions?
I think you should give all aldermen free golf lessons.
Free golf lessons? Jet, are you gonna give free golf lessons?
I shouldn't give anybody a golf lesson.
I wondered. Any questions on this tractor purchase? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.5, discuss and possible take action on the one-day mobile food service vehicle permit. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard and a second by Alderman Green to discuss. Ms. Arnold, you requested this. Would you like to speak?
Yeah, thank you. So this has been brought to our attention that we recently upped our permit for food trucks to be $250 for the calendar year. And the concern that we have now from some businesses that have hosted food trucks not under the special permit is that it's getting really hard for them to bring up those food trucks that may only come up once a year, right? So we're talking about the big food trucks from Nashville or south of Nashville that have gained a lot of popularity. They want to come up to Springfield for a one-day event. And the $250 fee, which is what we currently have, makes it really prohibitive for them to want to do that. So what I am interested in is talking about the opportunity to bring up maybe a one-day fee that, again, isn't covered by that special permitting. Like when you look at First Friday Night Market, they have a special permit. They're able to bring up these food trucks, so it's a little bit different. This is if, for example, you wanted a food truck to go to BS Brew Works, which is one of the folks who was talking about this. So I wanted to talk to y'all and see if there was an opportunity for us to perhaps put that in our ordinance.
Yes, sir.
Mayor, just to follow up, so because this was on the agenda, I think you had asked for kind of an idea of surrounding areas, what that looked like. And so Mr. Brewer and his staff sort of looked around Middle Tennessee to see who does and who doesn't, what their permit fee is in relation. So you'll see that we did not find a one-day permit per se. White House does a 3-day permit, and they do up to 2 of those, I believe, per year. But we also have the highest permit cost in Middle Tennessee. So you can see the different issues, different things on this chart. And we were waiting on a couple things to get that research completed. Otherwise, we'd have liked to have uploaded in your packet, but we wanted to provide you copies tonight in order to help you with your consideration.
Well, and I think the question was brought up to me when the soup truck wanted to come to the brewery. and they were not gonna come back for the rest of the year. And they would only come in the wintertime one time, because they were moving around Middle Tennessee, if I remember it correct. I'm looking at you,
That is one, yeah.
Yes,
There was
and they're
another for the
retired.
grilled cheesery.
And they're
that wanted
retired.
to come once.
I think
Yeah.
it makes sense because it's not something that's constantly in our market. It's kind of an exception to the rule. Provided that they're only coming one time, it does provide an enhancement to our
Existing
community.
businesses,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't see why that would not be a good idea. I feel like, in general, the food truck industry is new and an ever-evolving, industry. So, I mean, it's a unique situation I wouldn't have thought of, but I think it makes sense.
Oh, I never thought of it till I was quizzed about why we did it, and, what if you're only coming one time a year? Well, I never thought about that when we sat here and discussed
Right.
it.
That was.
Mr. Hubbard, you got a question?
Am I hearing right? So you just want to, just nullify that 250 fee?
No.
and
No.
bring
No,
it
no,
down?
no. I want the $250 fee to stay for businesses, for food trucks that are here continuously, right?
Like the
So,
ones that's out there today?
sure, you know, whatever might be out there, but they're gonna be here more than once or more than a few times a year. I want them to be able to have that $250 fee if they're setting up to their 2 or 3 times a week, right? But what I'm looking for here is the opportunity to have a one-day permit for, say, you know, the grilled cheesery, which is a very popular food truck down in Nashville. If they wanted to come up and be hosted by a local business, they're not gonna come up for $250 fee. And it's kind of irrelevant to them because that's a fee for an entire year for one day.
So which would, $50 for that? For that
I thought
position?
a $50 fee seemed right. To the few businesses that I spoke with, they felt as though the $50 fee felt right, but I know I would be open to the board's opinion on that, as to where you'd like to move. But $50 does feel right to me, just looking at booth costs for different street festivals around here, it's very much in line with that.
Well, and if the grilled cheesery's coming, we're excited to have them.
So who monitors this? I mean,
Ms. Prickles?
how many one-day permits are you gonna give? To a
That-
truck?
That would be a recommendation that we would like to see the board put a cap on that so that the process is not abused. You can see that White House for their 3-day permit limits to 2 per year. And so we would like to see a cap, otherwise you could, you know, potentially open it up to abuse or a competitive disadvantage to the food trucks that are based here that operate,
Absolutely.
you know.
Oh, yeah.
And so we wouldn't want to adversely affect those, just by trying to make way for those that are out of town, because we're really talking about out of town.
Yeah.
The out-of-town operations here, the ones from Nashville and other areas. So we would recommend and advise the board to set a cap on, if you did a one-day permit.
Would
Mr.
it
Trotter.
amend-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, unless I'm looking at this wrong, if if a food truck decided to come, say, 6 days, that would cost them $300, that would be more than the $250, so
Right.
that would make sense for them to do that anyway.
And if we have a cap on it,
I mean,
Yeah.
if you're gonna come 6 days, why not buy the $250 instead of paying $50 for six, you know, paying $300, you know? So
And I agree with that entirely. I think that the folks that we're trying to attract with something like this too, to be quite frank, would probably be so booked up, they wouldn't be able to come more than 2 or 3 times a year.
right.
Mr. Hubbard, you have a question?
So, are we gonna add an amendment to this, you know?
That's what we would do.
So what we would, if we can
How
get
would
it.
you like to word it, sir?
A general feel
Word it.
of, this would have to be an amendment to our food truck ordinance of, as, you know, part of the code. So we would, if we get a general feel of how the board would like us to bring something back to you, we'll have an ordinance for first reading on, in May. I'm sorry about that, but we'll have another first reading ordinance
It's okay.
in May.
It's a celebration.
But that's okay. We're just gonna have a big birthday party for Miss Green next month, so,
With cupcakes.
so we would bring that back crafted the way the board feels. And that's kind of what we were hoping for tonight, is some guidance from the board.
If, like under the first Friday night, they're able to come in because that's under another vendor's license or another vendor's
It's under a special event permit.
special event permit. So if they were wanting to just come one time a year, why would they not want to try to plan to come on that first Friday night of one of those months? We have 4, 5, 6 months, 4 or 5 months of that, or?
Because frankly, the really popular food trucks are already gonna be booked out in Nashville on a Friday night, and they're probably not going to want to come to Springfield. The folks that I've spoken with that have had examples, it's like on a Sunday, they wanted a food truck to come up and they saw the $250 permit and decided not to do it. So while Springfield is definitely growing and it's a very exciting time, Friday night markets for some of these folks, that's small fish, you know, compared to some of the festivals that happen down in Nashville. So I think getting people up here through this special event permit, or excuse me, through this one-day permit is going to show them the wonders of Springfield, and then, yeah, maybe eventually they will be able to come in. But if they wanted to come to both, they could, and they wouldn't have to worry about the one-day permit if they came into First Friday Night Market. But I think if we were to just limit them to that, it's a little bit short-sighted, because then any of the other 6 days of the week, you know, we don't have that many special events with those types of permits that just make it open for them to come anywhere. And correct me if I'm wrong, that special event permit only is for that area, correct? So they couldn't go set up at BS Brewworks that night.
That's correct. The special event permit is generally for blocking off streets and
Yeah.
roads and things like that to have an event.
Right.
Okay. Other questions?
Staff have a position on this?
We're open to certainly, if the board wants to do a one-day permit, I think our recommendation, like I said, would be a cap, so we don't competitively disadvantage our local food trucks. But there's certainly an argument to be made for folks. I know the BS Brewworks is the only one really that comes to mind that hosts an out-of-town food truck as kind of their own special event, but that's on private property. And so that's the issue, I think, that's come up before, the discussion that's come up. So we're not opposed to a one-day permit at all. And obviously, you can see from the chart that raising our fee when we had a $50 fee, it didn't matter as much. But now that we've raised the fee, it's sort of brought that, cost-benefit analysis for those food truck operations into play to come up here for one day for $250, or the business that's hosting them has offered to pay that in the past. And so that's why we wanted to put together a comparison for you, so you can see what the environment atmosphere looks like in Middle Tennessee.
So you want us to table this and let the staff bring?
No, they want to hear what we want them to bring back.
Seems like $50 is the going.
I want to make
Right.
sure, in my opinion, it's limited with a cap, whether
Yeah,
it's 2
I like
or 3.
$50 with 3 times a year.
I like the
something
3
that.
times a year too. So it's a
I
maximum
could go along
of
with
150.
Like once, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the 3/4 that people actually.
3
do
times a
business
year?
with food trucks. Yeah,
I agree.
And not 3 consecutive days.
Oh, that's a good point.
correct.
Good point. Like the lobster truck, I mean, you can look on their Facebook page, and they're all over Middle Tennessee, and Springfield and Robertson County line up when they come.
I mean, it might even be per quarter. You can do it once per calendar quarter. I don't know.
May I ask a question?
I think
What
3 times.
help organization, deal with these people? I mean, don't they have to have health permits, food permits?
Oh, yeah, it's highly regulated in the state of Tennessee.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's state.
And in order to get a permit from us, they have to show proof of a health inspection that Ms. Crickles evaluates before she issues the permit.
And that would not change on a one-day permit.
As long as we would bring it back to you such that it didn't, that the same requirements applied on a one-day permit that they would apply for anybody operating year-round. We would basically bring back, kind of envisioning this, we would bring back to you all an amendment to our food truck provisions that just include a one-day permit, but as far as all of the qualifications, everything else would stay the same. Fire extinguishers, the whole 9 yards about what we require.
All right.
What do we hear? I've heard 3 days, I've heard 2 days, I've heard 4.
I mean, 3
I-
days.
I think 3
Three.
that are not consecutive,
Right,
like Mr. Harris pointed out.
I like that.
Okay? That's our discussion. We'll move on. If no further discussion. 3.6.
Ms.
This-
Kim will read it the first read.
3.6, discuss and possible take action on the opening invocation policy. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard and a second by Alderman Green to discuss. And,
That's not, nobody did it, I wasn't ready.
oh, she wasn't ready. Okay, motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Vice Mayor Harris. Alderman Gregg brought this to our attention and wanted to discuss this, so I'm gonna turn it over to him.
I guess I would really like to know if prayer is something that's important to this board. We voted to do it. We had Brother Evans and Brother Rushing, and then it stopped. And I would like to see it continue.
If they can do it in the Senate of the United States of America, we can do it here. I definitely would like to see it. And have no respect to the other religions, if there's Hindu and Muslim clergy, that they can come also and say a prayer. Is there any restrictive language that we must put on the application that we might not want to hear? I'm talking to you, Mr. Manager.
The answer to that is no. That would be a violation of the freedom of religion if we start differentiating which particular beliefs we want to hear at this meeting and which ones we do not. Obviously, we can regulate out hate speech, offensive things, somebody couldn't get up here and go on a cussing tangent about a pothole during their prayer, for a minute and a half or 2 minutes. But we could not and would not certainly want you all to approve something that regulates or somehow filters out what type of speech is available.
We made some rules around this. Was this stopped because of,
I was
did
gonna
we stop doing it because of COVID?
I was gonna inquire, because we've never done it since I've been here,
Yeah,
but I'm
we
new.
had-
Yeah, we
But
have.
I've read the policy, so it seems like there already
The
is a
prayer was stopped
policy, it's
because
just a
of COVID?
matter of.
No.
There was
Uh-huh.
somebody, Brother Michael Smith was on there the first meeting that was stopped because of COVID. He was on there and he
Uh-huh.
requested that we not do it just because he didn't, because of all the regulations, and then it just never started back again after we went back to
So
live
maybe it's our own
meetings.
fault.
Yeah, but this has been in place for 3 years. This was pre-COVID. We
Right.
had 2 meetings that 2 ministers came to, and that's all that, and one of the ministers made the comment that they would make sure that they would have somebody here each meeting, and it's hard to get somebody to come and do that. It is the opinion of council that a member of this body cannot do it, nor a member of this staff cannot do it. I will be on record that I don't necessarily agree with that, but we have to operate off of what council tells us that we need to do. I will publicly go on record that I think it's a shame that we have to even approach this, that we can't have a prayer at the beginning of a Board of Aldermen meeting. It's on the agenda. If you don't want to hear the prayer, don't come in the room until it's over with. That's my opinion. I'll go on record for that, and I may have to go to the principal's office. But that's my opinion of that.
But I don't think that anyone's inherently against it. It seems like it just kind of fell off because of COVID, correct?
Well,
No.
Or is
No.
there another
Can we,
situation?
COVID is not the reason.
ask, as Alderman Mayor, can we ask someone each month to come and just pass it around the room and?
That's
it's-
normally.
It looks like
that's
there's a
normally
resolution that
legislative does.
specifies how this
They have
is to
different
be
members
done.
to invite different ministers. Dr. Kumar was invited about 3 this year.
We could go around the room and each one of us could invite somebody and, May's your month, June's your month, July, August.
But does it have to, was it written, and you would have to give some clarification, or Christie one, was it written that it has to be a member of a Springfield church that comes and gives that prayer?
Yes,
Yes.
and Ms. Green, that's the issue was the policy, by the time that we really got finished with the policy, and this is not a knock on Ms. Barty at all, but because I want you to know, as Mr. Harris just said, Ms. Barty she is looking out for the city of Springfield to
Right.
make
I
sure that
agree
we're
with
not
that.
unnecessarily exposed to liability. So there's no fault in the position that she took in her guidance and advice to the board on how to accomplish a rock-solid, Loctite invocation policy that really shields you from a lawsuit. The reality is, it became so shielded that we wound up not having an invocation as a result, okay? Hard to get sued over something you're not even able to do. And so it was really a tight policy, and that's the issue that Mr. Gregg had reached out and raised is that, hey, you know, we've got a policy that doesn't even really allow us to do this. It's like if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? Our policy is there, but we're not allowed, according to the policy, to promote it, to invite, to ask. So if no one knows about it, how do they know to come and ask, to provide an invocation before the meeting?
Well, it
Mr.
does state something about the city would run notification or run advertisement, does it not?
Yes, we,
Or that it would be, once it's run, then it would be posted at City Hall or something.
right.
On our website.
And it's on the public notices board. Mr. Trotter, you pointed out that state legislature does this. Mr. Hubbard, you pointed out that the U.S. Senate does this. We know that the Robertson County Commission does this. In full respect, again, to Ms. Barty's position to shield the city from unnecessary liability, civil liability, because that's her role. That's what you all have appointed her and hired her to do.
That's in her contract.
I believe that the board, you all can amend this thing if you want to loosen it up, to have an invocation, understanding, obviously, that in this day and time, we can be sued over just about anything.
We're
And so,
probably gonna be sued next over saying the pledge at the beginning of a meeting. That's gonna be the next thing down the line.
I fight against that.
I think we probably need to adjust this to, Robertson County instead of the city of Springfield. I forgot we had limited to just Springfield.
That's what I was thinking, maybe too.
Is there a reason why we limited it to Springfield? What was the reasoning behind that?
Probably because it's the city of Springfield.
Yeah.
We
That's just,
I think that was probably why it was done.
the idea was to keep it at
Local.
local, but also that prevents someone from outside trying to seize an opportunity for airtime and that kind of
City
opportunity.
manager, my own thing is whatever clergy come, an ordained person will be,
That's in our ordinance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I read it, because I was like, I'm just
Yeah.
to know the
Sure.
history of this.
I mean,
Is the issue the limitation of the city of Springfield, or is the issue requesting? Because it seems like it's published,
It's
so
both.
maybe these people don't know about it and the opportunity. No, it's both. Okay.
In my opinion, it's both. Mr. Martin, what do you think?
I agree. I think it's both. I believe that, if you look around the room, there just aren't many folks that, and I'm hopeful that they're all tuned in on the live stream, because I know everyone is, but there's just not many folks that show up on the third Tuesday of the month to hear us talk, And so I think there's an attendance thing, and if no one's here, I think that's why you see, like the Robertson County Commission, they find somebody that's there that night to do it. That's the way they used to do it anyway. They find someone that's there that night to give the invocation. I don't know to what extent, and they may have changed, but that they invite someone to be there specifically that night for the
They have
invocation.
their own commissioners that stand up and do it.
That's correct.
And
But
they have
that's
some
their-
that are
that's their
ordained.
decision to do so, but which,
And that's the same with state legislature, if they don't have a minister, some of the members will generally get up and do it.
well, we're gonna get into the point, my opinion, and let me say too, I'm not upset with Ms. Barty at all. I mean,
No,
I have an
no.
opinion. She did what she's supposed to do, as you said, so I'm not, people think I'm jumping her because we're not doing it. But if we get to this point that they've either got to volunteer to come and do this, certainly if we're going to change it, I think we need to take the Springfield part of it off. Whether it's, if you wanna do
Robertson
Robertson
County.
County or just an ordained minister. But if we get to the point that a member of this body invites somebody to come, that's well and fine, and I'm perfectly fine with doing a prayer at the beginning of the meeting, but I think we're gonna get to the point that, hey, this was Tim's month, and he didn't ask anybody, he forgot, so we're not gonna do it this month, but we may do it next month. So I am not opposed, since I was the one that initiated this 3 years ago, that we just change this, that we observe a moment of silence after the pledge, and let it stand at that. And I can do that either if there's no one here to offer the invocation, that we do a moment of silence, if you wanna go at it from that standpoint.
Either or.
I think we're gonna get into a situation that if each one of us is out trying to invite someone or do that we're gonna have months that we're gonna be in the same situation that we're in now, that we're not doing anything at all. But, Mr. Hubbard's ordained, but he's also a member of this board, so by that, you're saying that he can't do that. Mr. George is ordained, but he's assuming on city payroll because he's filming this meeting.
We always got Terry Martin.
Is he ordained?
Mail
Yes.
order.
Mel.
Not kidding.
Are you seminary trained, sir?
I am ordained.
Okay.
Minister or ordained minister?
Yes.
He's on staff.
But yet, we're in that same situation that they're city employees, so therefore, by legal's advice, they can't do it. She said that they're saying it's conflict of interest and that we're.
I personally would like to see, us have something, and I like the moment of
I would
silence.
like to, personally, I would like to see the prayer myself, but I don't know
Absolutely.
if that's gonna be a feasible thing each month. It hasn't been so far out of the
Can
two
we not
times we've
have a
done it in the
technical
last 3 years.
difficulty for about 2 minutes and, one of us say a prayer?
Can we not just take that stipulation about board member or employee, take that away, but all at the same time try to secure someone else outside of.
Ms.
that
Barty?
arena?
I have no problem with it, but if the council says that we should not do that,
This council?
legal counsel.
Why?
Because in the case law, it references a corporation of citizens that come in and make prayer, Justice O'Connor gave a specific opinion, following on the Fourth Circuit opinion that was issued. And she specifically referenced the citizens. The citizens should be given an opportunity. She went further to say, or did not go further to say, that she made an implication that the board itself or the council, it was the town council, I believe, should not give the prayer. There are about 3 different standards that are incorporated through the case law since 1984. One of those is would a reasonable person believe that the council is moving forward with a particular denomination or practice of faith. The consensus between our in-house consultant and some of the other municipal attorneys in the state are, what is that reasonable standard? And do we want to be the case law that establishes, determines what a reasonable person would determine? One thing, when we originally prepared the ordinance, the proposal that I sent, I went back and pulled it prior to the meeting. It was a little longer than the one we have. I think it was actually about 10 pages. That was modeled after Hamilton County and I believe Knox County. It included some language for a form letter to send to a list of churches in the community. And there's been guidance in the case law. I think it's City of Greece, which is a city of New York, that specifically address some of these concerns, would allow someone, the city manager, the assistant city manager, to find a list of churches or clergy in the community and send letters to invite those individuals to come. I don't remember that was changed, and quite frankly, I don't remember why, but we went to more of a public notice rather than a letter at the time. So that is a possibility for you all to do. But ultimately, and let me go on record and say, I would love nothing more than for a prayer to be said before this meeting. The fact of the matter is, the case law is very clear that it's very specific on what can and cannot be done. Prayer is a tradition in the country. There are references to George Washington, to the Connell Congress, and at all times, how prayer has been a part of our history, which is why it's still included in Washington, D.C., in Nashville, and before so many
the fine line, the slippery slope where we are.
With the Senate format, faith, the nomination bias is not part of it, okay? And it's well kept of whoever gives a prayer, not to include anything of that nature, and not to put out any other religion, okay?
Can we research that?
Basically, the prayer is simple, simple prayer for peace, constructive administration of the situation. And I think that most of the clergy in this county would be disciplined. They wouldn't promote.
Yeah, our policy, Mr. Hubbard, states that. It states that it should be, I believe, limited to 2 minutes. But we also can't regulate the content. We can ask, and we can make a suggestion, but we certainly cannot regulate
The content?
the content of the prayer. And we do not have the ability to screen the prayer or pre-approve the prayer. Like I said, Town of Greasy Galloway was the case that I was referencing. That was handed down by the Supreme Court in 2014. It has since been cited in, I believe, about 25 more cases, but only in dissenting opinions and concurring opinions, not necessarily creating new law. It followed, all those cases essentially followed that, and that's the standard. That is where we come into the prayer being offered by a council person, and the standard is a reasonable observer of a government action as religious or anti-religious. So that's that slippery slope, which I know Ms. Green remembers that, and Mr. Martin remembers that phrase from law school, that you run into what is reasonable, and a lot of it comes down to interpretation. And I think that's where it's my job to, although I realize that it's restrictive, but to protect you all.
Sure.
I think I've shared with some of you that we have a relatively new lawyer in our firm who is actually a member of the firm. He was assistant counsel to the city attorney for Clarksville for about 10 years. And he and I discussed this earlier today, and he just mentioned to me that they had the same issues, and they received phone calls regularly from organizations with threats and accusations and so forth. So they really had to take some steps to try to avoid litigation.
Question.
Yes, sir.
We live in a day and time now that probably if Mr. Trotter doesn't like my shirt, he can file a lawsuit against me, more than likely. So we're probably gonna get to the point that even if we're able to work it out, that we have an ordained minister come, at some point, there's gonna be something said in the content that we're probably gonna open ourselves up to a lawsuit over what was said during the prayer, for the content during a city meeting. Are we opening ourselves to any lawsuit or any problem if this board adopts a moment of silence following the Pledge of Allegiance?
It doesn't matter what you do, like you said, the color of your shirt. But I think that based on the historical significance of prayer in government, that we would be safer if we had a moment of silence.
What we do in that moment of silence is each person's prerogative.
That's
Pray to
correct.
God.
So we're not coming across that we're suggesting that you pray during this moment of silence. We don't feel.
So after those
That may
different,
be what we need to do.
yeah, well, after those different cases, I'm gonna concur with moment of silence.
So does that have to come back on the agenda next month?
Yes, it would.
or-
It would have to come back and to amend that ordinance.
Let's see what it might
Is
say.
it an ordinance?
It's a resolution.
Resolution.
It's a resolution adopting the policy, so we will bring that, if that's what the board wants to do.
We'll bring it back and talk about it again.
Is that-
Yes. Is that good?
Yeah, moving right along.
Okay. Any more discussion on that? If
I will
not,
go on record, it'd probably get me in trouble again, but I hate we're having to have this conversation.
it seems crazy to have this conversation. 3.7, discuss and possible take action on a recommendation from the traffic committee to post no parking signs on the south side of Third Avenue from North Oak Street to Connell Street. Motion made by Alderman Green, a second by Alderman Gregg. I'll call on our city manager, Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. This first one is the first of multiple on the agenda tonight, but this is the one that we're farther along in the process. This is the one we had the public hearing on at the beginning of the meeting. Mayor, if it's okay with you and the board, I would like for Mr. Moore to kind of give an update, because there were several locations that were brought up and raised that were referred to the traffic committee, and some they have made recommendations on, and others they have, I guess, ultimately made a recommendation not to. They didn't find an issue or a solution to a problem. So if Mr. Moore could kind of run through the ones on the agenda or all of the affected areas, and then explain why the committee didn't make a recommendation on some of the others.
Thank you, Mayor and Board Alderman. Well, the first one, the Third Avenue, we already know, as Mr. Martin expressed, we're further along on that one. And that one, along with most all of these, are results of congested roads where emergency vehicles cannot pass. We have varying widths of roads, but some of them are 18 to 20 foot in width. And a vehicle's average distance is between 6 and 8 feet, or width. So if you have them side by side, you want either side of the road, vehicles can't pass. Not even a regular vehicle can pass in some of these cases. Now, going over the individual areas and streets that we had, I'll go over the ones that recommendations were made. Though the first one item, which will be item 3.8, is the White Street. Now, this one is a particular concern, but only during a certain time period. We have individuals that have decided they do not wish to wait in the lines at the schools in order to pick up their children. So they give the children a walk-to-home pass. And then the children, instead of them going in line at the school, the children are walking to the library. And then they're forming an unofficial loading zone on White Street. And so many parents have been doing this that it's become a safety hazard that they're completely lining the road. So if you're on Fifth Avenue, you wish to turn on said White Street, say if you're trying to go to the library or anywhere on those streets, you can't turn on the street because people are waiting to get in line, waiting for the children. And it goes all the way up White Street, but we're really only trying to, because there are people that also park on that side of the street, so we don't want to do the whole street. So we're doing just the beginning, the throat side of the street from Fifth Avenue, because they're not only on White, but they're actually backing on to Fifth. And then if you're trying to go westbound on Fifth, you'll have to go around them, because there's no turning lanes or parking areas on Fifth. And then on White Street, when you make the turn, you're basically going into oncoming traffic in order to pass. And if a car's coming, well, you have a real problem there. And that's on White Street. And we're only, the traffic board recommended that we only do this for the first 200 feet to cover that, so you would have somewhere to go and accommodate other vehicles. We prefer that there wasn't an unofficial loading zone occurring at this location, but there are people that have homes that on that side of the street that would need some accommodations to be able to park during these hours. The next item, which would be 3.9, which is covering Page Street. Page Street is it is a narrow road, and there has been an increase of houses on Page as a result of new developments. Houses have been demolished and bigger homes and additional homes have been added to the street. And it's only an 18-foot, I believe it was 18-foot, I want my memory on that. 18-foot street. So this one is a big hindrance. You consider it a 6 to 8 foot vehicle parked on the side of the road. Fire truck, 10.5 foot wide. You try to have a vehicle come down there, it's already difficult, but you have on both sides of the road, it's not happening.
Okay, I'm gonna stop right there,
Okay.
and we're gonna go back and talk about 3.7.
Okay.
Just a second,
Yes,
because
ma'am.
they may have questions about 3.7, the one that we are on our agenda for right now that's on the floor. The one on the floor is 3.7. Do you have discussion about 3.7?
About the letter that we received in our packet, I mean, this, I don't know how we address it other than we address it, but it seems legitimate.
I
That
did wanna ask a question about that also.
parking, if I'm understanding it, the parking at one, the front of their house, it's already no parking.
Is there
Paid parking is
Says the
allowed.
front side of home on 221 Walnut already has no parking signs.
Oh, on Walnut, yes,
Yes.
but they park on Third.
Yes, so then this person is stating that if the no parking signs are added to the side of their house on Third, then anyone visiting their home will have nowhere to park.
Their house is on the north side, and the no parking's on the south side.
I think that the person writing the letter, Mr. Harris, misunderstood the action that was before the board. I think the letter, the way I read it, contemplates no parking on either side of the street, and that's not the recommendation
That
from the
was my
traffic
question.
committee.
So there would be one side of the street that still would be able to park. Now, you might have to cross the street, but there would be
That is
street
correct.
parking. Okay.
Yeah, the proposal before you all, the recommendation from the traffic committee is only to put no parking on the south side of Third Avenue.
Okay.
Right.
And I believe, because it generated, I believe there was a social media post that generated some concern, and so I believe the message may have gotten misinterpreted or misconstrued somewhere along the way that there would be no parking on either side of the street, which is not the recommendation of the traffic committee.
So it might not necessarily be on the side they want to park on, but there would be parking on one side.
Maybe. But I believe, Mr. Moore, their particular residence is on the north side anyway, so they would be
That
able
is
to park in
correct,
front of
yes.
their home.
Yeah.
There are two homes, just so you
To
know.
the side of their home.
To the side.
To the side, yes. There are two homes on that street that don't have adequate parking at all, and they also are on the north side. So their parking basically will continue as is.
Okay?
So we're voting on just this one right now.
Yes, we're on 3.7. Any more discussion on 3.7? No more discussion, we're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.8, discuss and possible take action on the recommendation from the Traffic Committee to post no parking signs from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. on the east side of White Street, 200 feet north from Fifth Avenue West. Motion made by Alderman Green and a second by Alderman Arnold to discuss. Okay? Questions to Mr. Moore?
Is this 7 days a week or Monday through Friday?
Well, we hadn't done time, but I'll recommend Monday through Friday. We only have
So,
one
and then
period.
what's, I guess my mindset thinks, what's gonna stop it from moving to another street? Nothing?
That crossed my mind as well,
I
yes.
mean, what's gonna keep them from going, what your next street's is, Bourne? I don't know what your next street is, but what's gonna keep it from going there?
Just
Going up to Gardner?
I
Keep
think,
moving, I guess, I mean,
Alderman Green?
I was just gonna say, I think a lot of it stems from the library being a public area where children can go and gather, and so there's a lot of just children on the street in general, at least what I hear.
Yes.
Maybe they won't move to Boren just because that's the most accessible street to the library, which is where children go after school.
Well, being on the library board, the problem that's taking place is that between 3:30 and 4:15 each day, anywhere from 50 to 100 children from the middle school
Yeah.
are descending upon the library. My understanding, they're playing out in White Street or blocking traffic out in White Street, so this is part of that.
Yes.
And then they have been told that they either have to leave the property or go inside of the library. They can't be outside of the library is what my understanding is. So you've got
This is a
75 kids descending into the library at one time, and it is causing some major havoc. There is destruction taking place at the library. But, you know, how we're gonna handle it still remains to be seen.
Okay.
But, I'm sure you're getting some complaints probably from these houses of the
Yes.
Yes,
kids playing out in the road.
yes.
One or two.
Other discussion? Any other questions?
So is that the plan? We do this and it moves to another street and we just address it?
No, I think this problem, because you raised another issue about the kids in the library that aren't being picked up, and that's a separate issue that the police department has spent a considerable amount of time trying to resolve, and I know you and I have had some conversations about that. The issue that the traffic committee is resolving is the safety issue that's presented by the parents picking up their kids because of the way they park on White Street. Anyone else turning off of White Street or trying to turn out of White Street can't see. And it causes anyone turning onto White Street to have to go around to the cars parked on the east side and, or whatever side that is, and go around into oncoming traffic. So that's a safety hazard that needs to be solved, and that's what I believe is before you all.
But is this no parking side, is that the side that the houses are on?
That's correct. There's already no parking on the other side of the street, and I believe that is the west side. The west side already has no parking. That's along the library. The east side, it's not designated, and so the recommendation is for the first 200 feet of White Street.
So if these folks have a home on White Street and they have been used to parking out in front of their house, they're not gonna be able to do this from 2 to 5?
I believe the homes are unaffected by the 200, I believe that's the point of the 200-foot
200-foot.
limitation is to protect, because there are some homes towards the northern end of White Street that do need to park on the street. And so this is to basically eliminate the safety issue at the Fifth Avenue side of oncoming people turning into oncoming traffic.
So with the footage that you're placing into this, we do not anticipate it affecting any present homes that are parking on the street?
Not any that are parking on the street.
Okay.
Any other discussion? No other discussion?
And this is based on a public hearing?
So what
Next
we're
month.
asking, yes, sir, what we're asking for you all to do is to do just like we did on the previous item, which is to, if you all are, feel comfortable with this recommendation, to move forward with a public hearing next month.
And these homeowners will be notified?
They will be notified in writing. We will mail a notice to each home, as we did with the previous item.
Any other questions? No other questions? We're ready for vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.9, discuss and possible take action on the recommendation of the Traffic Committee to post no parking signs on the east side of Page Street from 16th Avenue West to 17th Avenue East on the east side. Motion made by Alderman Green, a second by Alderman Hubbard to discuss. Questions about this?
This is my ward.
Yes, sir.
And, I several times would try to get through, and I brought it to the attention of city manager. It's too narrow. And for emergency vehicles, as you said, you know, it's difficult. So, no parking zones, no parking signs are really needed.
We've got this problem all over the city of Springfield.
But it's really-
I followed the fire truck on the 4th of July last year coming up North Walnut, and we were stuck after the fireworks. Any questions about 3.9? Discussion? No more discussion, we're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.10, discuss and possible take action on the recommendation of the Traffic Committee to post no parking signs on the west side of North Brown Street from Fifth Avenue East to South Pawnee Drive, the west side of Wilson Street from Fifth Avenue East to the dead end, and on north side of Fourth Avenue East from North Brown Street to Memorial. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Alderman Green to discuss. Mr. Moore.
Yes, this is the similar situation where, same story, people are parking on both sides of the road, few emergency vehicles can't get through, and like the others, this is a particular neighborhood it's covering, that's why we put all three in the same category, in the same motion. And again, with this one, we would like to put limit the traffic, or limit the parking to the side of the utilities. So that eliminates one other obstacle for our emergency vehicles to get through. However, there are some fire hydrants in some of these areas, we will paint no parking on those on the street. Outside of that will, same as the others, it just frees up the area.
Okay. Any questions on this? Discussion? No discussion? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.11, discuss and possible take action to extend the patching contract for Sessions Paving Company for an additional 12 months for the maintenance and repair of city streets. The contract would expire on June 30th, 2023. Motion made by Alderman Gregg, a second by Alderman Trotter to discuss. Questions? Discussion? Bookkeeping? No discussion? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.13, discuss and possible take action on a contract for $51,685 with Wold HFR Designs of Brentwood for municipality facility study. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris, a second by Alderman Green. You want to speak on this?
Sure.
City Manager?
So we received, this is something that originated from strategic planning. We put out an RFP, a request for proposals. Received proposals and vetted those, interviewed our top choice, which was Wold HFR, who has a tremendous amount of experience in this area in doing this for other places in Middle Tennessee. They have an office in Brentwood. They do a lot of work in Middle Tennessee. They actually doing a lot of work in White House right now, and in a kind of a reference check, we checked with the city of White House, and they're very pleased with the services that they've received. So that was nice to hear from our neighbors in White House. And on top of that, the best part I think is we had kind of taken a shot in the dark at a $60,000 price tag for this thing, and it came in at $51,600. So we were really pleased. I would love to tell you that was because of some calculated analysis that we performed as a staff of how much this was going to cost, and that would just be a lie. It was not. We were kind of shooting from the hip there and hoping that we got it right and we kind of gauged that based on our size and some other things. But $51,600 is a good price tag, and we're excited to get to work with them if you all approve it.
It was an educated guesstimate.
You could call it that.
Any questions about this? We asked for it. No questions, no discussion? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.14, discuss and possible take action on an engineering service agreement with Rye Engineering PLC for a non-revenue water detection and an analysis. Motion made by Alderman Green, a second by Alderman Gregg to discuss. Any questions on this agreement? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.15, discuss and possible take action on a contract with Community Development Partners, LLC, for a consulting service for the American Rescue Plan Act grant requirements. Motion made by Alderman Hubbard, a second by Alderman Green to discuss. Of course, this is something we're required to do. No questions? No discussion? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.16, discuss and possible take action on a unit price paving contract for the streets contract, maintenance and repair in the amount of $1,526,603.50 with Sessions Paving Company of Nashville, Tennessee. Motion made by Alderman Green and second by Alderman Hubbard to discuss. Any questions? No questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Thank you. 3.17, discuss and possible take action on a proposal for the 2022-23 annual budget for the Springfield Robertson County Joint Airport Board. But we need a motion to discuss. Motion made by Vice Mayor Harris and a second by Alderman Green to discuss. Any questions on this proposed annual budget? I want to thank the Springfield Robertson County Airport Joint Board. They're doing a great job moving forward, hiring, and there's lots of activity at the airport, so.
And the good thing about the hiring, they hired a very professional man who was in the military with the aeronautical division. So,
And those folks have spent a lot of hours and they're volunteers.
exactly.
Any discussion or questions? We're ready for a vote. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
Okay, we're ready for our consent doc.
Mayor, without objection, move to take as one.
Okay, anyone object? Okay, taking it all together. Any questions on the consent doc all together? No questions? We're ready for a vote.
Hold on, stop.
Come on, degree lady.
I'm thinking you can.
Okay, she's worked hard tonight. Hold on. Give her a second.
Mayor, you not voting?
Yes, sir, I'm trying to take up for Miss Brickles over here. Anyone like to change their vote? Please record the votes.
Motion passes 7-0.
You can tell we're all tired. I am going to turn this meeting over to our city manager, Mr. Ryan Martin.
Well, thank you, Mayor. I'll be extremely brief. I know we're 3 minutes past our hour tonight, so I'll be very brief.
That's 2 hours.
2 hours.
Just one.
Can you count?
Oh, that's right, it's 2 hours. My goodness, wow.
You're tired too.
Yeah, apparently. Okay. So you may have seen today that the Freedom Fest announcement got made. That'll be Sunday, July 3rd. We're really excited to bring back the 4th of July celebration again. Grace Baptist Church is going to be the presenting sponsor for that. And the headlining act this year is the Oak Ridge Boys. They provide that entertainment. That's part of their sponsorship, is they take care of the stage and entertainment. So that's the headlining act. There's a good amount of, I think, of an undercard there for musical activities that will go on, and we're working on some other good things for that event as well. The spring community cleanup is this Saturday, so we've all heard complaints about the trash in and around Springfield. So what everyone that has complained to me about the trash, I have given them the link to sign up for the cleanup and invited them to help me do something about it. And so I hope you all will as well. We're very, very, very appreciative. We had some sponsors come along. TVA is back with us again this year sponsoring this event. They provide, their sponsorship is by way of supplies with vests and bags and things and water. And then Larry's Restaurant this year. We wanted to make this event bigger and better, and we wanted to entice more folks to come out and volunteer. And how do you do that but feed them? And so Larry's Restaurant came along, and really appreciative of Alan Pratt and his staff, and decided to sponsor, and they're paying for breakfast. So for all of those that have signed up, and we have y'all over, or right at 180 folks that have signed up to do this this weekend. So that's a big deal. There are a lot of people that care about cleaning up and care about this community, and so we're happy to essentially double that event. Mayor mentioned earlier about the budget. We should have that to you next week. I want to remind you that the budget work session will be prior to the regular May meeting. That's when we set that date. So we're going to celebrate Miss Green's birthday with a budget work session, and a lot.
My dream come true.
It is. It's what she always wanted, and so we're able to do that for her. I'm just grateful we could deliver. And so we'll have our regular May meeting after that with the first reading, and it will be quite a lengthy one. We're going to give Ms. Brickles a few days off before that regular meeting date because of all the first readings. The sewer rehab work, this is important to let you know that it continues. The Phase 2C project is crossing Fifth Avenue right now. So we're shutting down Fifth Avenue on a nightly basis. We're not, the contractor is, but that work is being done nightly. We have notified all the residents in the area because it does create quite a stir, but TDOT kind of controls when and how that work can be performed. So I did want to let you know of that work, as it should be wrapped up hopefully this week, weather dependent. And that's it, Mayor. Thank you all.
Wrapped up this week.
We hope so. The
Okay, depending
crossing-
on the weather.
The crossing of Fifth Avenue.
Okay,
Mayor,
sir.
Mr. Martin pointed out the Freedom Fest post, and I think this board needs to recognize that it is currently not outperforming the post of our city clerk
That's correct.
and her accomplishments. So to congratulate her for her achievement.
Great job. Thank you, and thank you for stepping up and doing that. We appreciate you and everything that you did. Speech? She's tired. We're saving her voice for next month for all those first readings. This meeting is adjourned.